All of my paintings, anything I'm selling, it's all from my photography because, for one, it's more personal to me. You know, anytime you can take a photograph or paint from life, it's more personal and it means more. I want to paint my own stuff, my own photography or whatever. So there's a lot of photography.
It's an experience that you have.
Exactly. So there is a lot of pictures that I don't post on, social media just because I want to paint them.
Hello and welcome to the Wild Shutter Podcast. I'm Matthew Gailey coming to you from Pennsylvania once again. The Wild Shutter Podcast is a podcast where we like to talk to wildlife photographers and find out the stories behind their images. And before we go ahead and get started today, I just want to remind you that we have recently started a Facebook group, and you are free to, whether you're a photographer or just a fan of wildlife photography, look us up on Facebook, Wild Shutter Podcast, and you can join the group and you can see lots of fantastic images that wildlife photographers are creating. And if you're listening to this on an audio platform, I encourage you to look us up on YouTube, Wild Shutter Podcast. It's actually under my name, Matthew Gailey, Gehly, and you'll be able to find our podcast. And we have several podcasts now with several episodes that you can listen to. Go ahead and go through our archive and enjoy the conversations that we've had with lots of fantastic photographers. So, without any further ado, I'm excited today to introduce you to a photographer, an artist, and a real-life cowboy. I have today with me David Barry. If you're looking for him on Instagram, it's David Barry Studio. David, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for taking the time out to talk with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, I'm flattered, and it's awesome. I'm glad you're doing this and everything, and very thankful.
Well, I'm very happy to have you here with us, and I thought that we'd just start out by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at, maybe how you got there, and how you got started in both photography and with your artistry.
Yeah, so, I was thinking about this. Art, actually, I started in first grade doing drawing competitions, like bookmark, and did very well. And then, as I got older, there was more interest. I was more interested in football and motocross. So the art kind of took took a back seat. And so I didn't really get back into painting until I moved to Nashville back in, when did I move there? 2003? I think it was 2003, and that's when I started painting again. And so, and then photography, my dad was always a photographer. I still have his camera here, the old 35 millimeter Canon. So do I know how to use it? No. It's just there, like a good, little thing to remember. But, I've always loved taking pictures, but when I grew up, digital was just starting to come around. So it didn't, it was all the Polaroid or, the cheesy camera. So I didn't really get a lot into it. I know I loved it, but I didn't really get into photography. I didn't buy my first DSLR until I was about to leave Nashville. And that was back in 2010-ish. So, but wildlife has always been something that I've experienced and something that is just so cool. I was thinking about the first experience, and it's kind of weird. It was when I came across, so my dad would always go into antique stores, and I went into one, and I remember I was probably in grade school. I was very young. I saw this stuffed fox and it just like, I just loved it so much. I was hooked on foxes from there. And it's kind of weird seeing a stuffed animal, that's been killed and whatnot. But, and especially hanging around my grandfather with horses and stuff. So I always loved wildlife and animals, but seeing that fox just really inspired me. And so I always wanted a fox, and, so they're always my top three favorite animals. And then, so that kind of started really loving wildlife. And then we lived way out in the country, and I'll tell you one quick story. I guess it was my first.
Where was this at? This wasn't Nashville. This was where?
Oh, I'm sorry. This was up in northern Idaho. So northern Idaho. Okay. Yep. And so we lived way out in the country. I was, always, if I wasn't in school, I was always on the motocross track, a makeshift track that I made. And I was working out there, and up on the rock, I just kind of turned, and at first I thought, oh, maybe the neighbor got another big dog or a husky. And I just stared at it, and it was just laying down on this huge rock. And I couldn't, take my eyes off of it. I was like, is that a husky? And we had tons of coyotes there, and coyotes, 30, 40 pounds. And I had a German Shepherd at the time, which he was weighing 80, 90 pounds. So this guy was just way bigger than my German Shepherd, Casey. And so I was like, either somebody got a new dog, in the kind of neighborhood down the street, or this is a wolf. And it just, and then probably 20, 30 seconds later, he kind of get up slowly, and he started trotting back up the hill. And I just remember that so vividly. And so I asked the neighbor, and he was kind of like an older brother. He got into motorcycles, and he would help me tips and help me tear apart my bike and help me with the track and stuff. And I go, John, did neighbor get a new dog, or did, a husky or something? He's like, no, you saw that wolf, huh? And I'm like, was that a wolf? And he's like, yeah, it's been taking out the coyotes in the back, and I seen them. And I'm like, okay. So that was my first wolf experience, not really knowing it for sure, but that was so cool. So those two kind of really, and he would take me, we would go see, fishers and stuff like that, in the woods. So it was just a cool experience. And then, when I moved down here in Wyoming to really see the big game, I mean, that's just a whole nother level. So, but those are kind of that's really kind of at an early age, really set in with me. So, yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. So yeah, we don't get wolves here in Pennsylvania. We do have coyotes though.
Okay.
So you said that in first grade, you had this interest in art, and you were maybe drawing, and so when did that really become something that you wanted to pursue further, in so much that it became a career?
Well, I should have listened to my parents, because they were really trying to push me to the art, but I was more interested in football. I love football. I really into motocross, really into snowboarding. So, I was like, drawing, yeah, that's down the road. And so I still dabbled here and there, drawing and a little bit of painting, but not much. And so, I mean, like, for instance, in high school, there was it was always filled. So I couldn't even take an art class even. So even, if you're a football player, you had to take weight training. So, and then the other elective is whatever was available. And so, yeah, art didn't really, like I said, when I moved to Nashville, my dad was doing a lot of Bob Ross. And so I'm like, huh. And so I kept watching that, watched a couple of shows, and I'm like, I think I could do that. And so that's how I kind of got back into it. Did a little Bob Ross, but Bob Ross it teaches you a lot of bad mistakes if you want to go traditionally into painting, because it's, one of my friends asked me, well, how do you compare it? What's the difference between Bob Ross and traditional? The easiest way I can explain it is Bob Ross is like fast food, and traditional is like fine dining. Both are good. I love to eat both, fast food and, fine dining. But that's the biggest difference between the two is, one takes shortcuts, one is not good for you, in the long run. You can still, kick out a cool painting, but it's all uniform. They all look the same, and it's a certain technique, right? And then I started taking lessons from a guy, David, in Nashville. I saw a sign. He just started doing oil painting classes. So I'm like, why don't I do that? So I started that, and he had to break me from a lot of those Bob Ross habits. And so that's when I started really getting, that fever back, of painting. So, yeah. So that was back in '03. Wow.
So then what brought you to Wyoming, where you're at now?
Well, I didn't have a lot of personal in my life. So, after I didn't have much in backing up in Idaho, I decided, because I've been coming to Jackson for years. And so I'm like, you know what? For my art career, for everything I want to do, Jackson is, the place to be. I mean, honestly, if anybody is not familiar with Jackson, it's a lot like Alaska. It's, besides Alaska, Jackson's the only place that has huge mountains, that has wolves, grizzlies, bison, pronghorn, anything you can think of in the wildlife, it's all right here. In the surrounding area, Montana, a little bit, the Jackson area, but to get everything of that, really, this is only the place besides Alaska that you could go, so yeah, so I decided to move, and, I'm just still trucking along.
Well, and, you were in Nashville, and obviously Nashville is the country music scene. And I kind of feel like Jackson is like the wildlife artistic scene, isn't it, compared to Nashville and country music?
Sure. And so it's funny because I went to school for audio engineering because I couldn't sing and I couldn't play an instrument. And so I'm like, what, so I'm like, the next best thing is to record and be a producer. And then I did that, loved it, got into a little bit of video music editing as well. But, even with that, then I moved to Nashville. I'll kind of do a full circle here. So went from Idaho, Washington, then I moved. I had some relatives in Texas, so I'd go there. And then after I graduated from audio engineering, I came back up to Idaho, Washington, and then I moved to Nashville. And then Nashville, I moved back up to Idaho, Washington, and then from Idaho, Washington, I moved here to Jackson. So, if you caught all that,
where in the world is David Barry?
Right, exactly. So, wow. All those experiences taught me so much, and so. But yeah, what were we saying? Sorry, I got
I don't even remember at this point. I got lost on the way.
Music in Nashville. So yeah, the Nashville scene right now is just booming. And same thing like here, because again, with Jackson, like I said, the mountains, there's a lot of people don't even know about the Wind River Range. That's becoming very popular. In the Wind River Range, you have, the mountain, the New River Return.
You probably shouldn't talk about that because we don't want people flooding there.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's in New York, I think. So, New York, yeah.
Yeah.
So
head out there.
So, I spent, that's the thing is like, yeah, so Nashville has the music scene, which I love music, but again, it's so hard to break into. I don't care if you're writing songs, singing, whatever. I have good friends that done that, and it's so hard to do. And so, I decided, I need to make a living. I couldn't live on the street. So I kind of put audio engineering to the side, and that's where kind of painting started. Really, I was starting to focus on that. And, but no, you're right. Jackson here, I live just outside of Jackson. It's about 30, 40 minutes, depending on traffic and construction going on right now, but I love it out here. I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I mean, I really don't even need to go in the park because I seen, 399 a couple of years ago went right through our backyard. I don't know where I was, but apparently she was. I don't have to go very far to go in the, to be in the wild. So it's just so I've been very blessed. So it's been very cool. Yeah.
Well, that is awesome. Wow. Well, maybe we should let people see some of your work here. Now, I know that we can see maybe a work in progress there behind you.
Oh, yeah.
But you did share. Well, go ahead.
No, I was saying, no, that's just a moose so I don't know. When's the last time you were out here?
2019, right before COVID. Okay. I'm so glad that's the only time I was ever there. But I say it all the time. I'm so glad that we came in 2019 before the world went crazy. Oh. I had been dreaming about coming to the Tetons forever. And if I would have been planning for the summer of 2020, I would have lost my mind.
Oh, yeah. It was a good thing you came in 19. Well, you need to get back out here and let me know when you do come back out here. So that moose he's one of the famous two that's out here. The antlers, they grow back their antlers very similar every year, the same way. And him, I spent, out of all the moose, I've spent the most with. This particular one. I won't name him just yet. I'm going to see if people will recognize his rack. He's got a very distinctive, I call it the sword that shoots up there that's past his paddles. But he's very distinctive. Not sure if he's still around yet. I don't know if you probably know what I'm talking about, who I am. But so I'm doing a little experimenting with my paintings. And so this one is another experiment that I'm playing around with, so we'll see. It's going to be a awesome. Long work in progress, so we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, let's put up an image on the screen right now. You shared a painting with me of Blondie, and this is just beautiful. The rim light that you created on her, just fantastic. So I guess maybe the first thing I should ask you, just so that everyone knows, who is Blondie?
Yeah, so Blondie is actually my favorite bear, my favorite grizzly bear. A lot of people is 399 or other bears, but Blondie is, one of the bears that I spent the most time with. And she's the most beautiful bear out of all the bears. And I don't think anyone would disagree if they saw her compared to 399, 610, whatnot. So it was just, I spent hours on that day. And rim light, I love rim light. I love rim light photography, rim light paintings. It's just one of those things I just really love. And so is when she had the two, I call her Blondie Jr. She's got so many different names. I call her Blondie Jr. So that was with her and her brother, right before she kicked them out of when was that? I think it was May of 2019, actually. May or early June. It was right before she kicked those two out.
The only two grizzly bears that I've ever been able to photograph were her two that she just kicked out. Yeah. Nice.
I
believe.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so I just fell in love with her from the start, she hasn't been out this year.
And how is she connected to 399?
She's not related. Actually, there's actually been times when 399 has chased her off, because they kind of share the same Pilgrim Creek area. But yeah, Blondie hasn't been seen typically the last few years. She only come out when she's had a cub. So other than that, she stays in the backwoods. And a lot of people don't know this, but with like bears, especially with grizzlies, and that's why 399 is so famous. She stays close to the road, especially with her cubs, to kind of push back the male bears. Most wildlife don't like humans, so that's one way, and they kind of figured that out. So typically Blondie, if she doesn't have any cubs, especially in the last few years, she hasn't been seen. So, this year no one's really seen her. Last year, of course, she came out with the triplets. Before that, she came out with one that got killed, unfortunately. and then, before that was with the two. So she hasn't really been seen a whole lot. And of course, the Rangers, they love to haze them and stuff like that, but that's another topic. So, but Blondie is my favorite. And this painting is probably not the best painting of mine, but it means probably one of the most to me. So, yeah, it was a great day for that.
So, a couple questions about the painting. Why that pose? Was that did you take a photograph?
Yes.
And then, okay, so you used the photograph as a reference that you had taken.
Right. So all of my paintings, 99% of them, I say 99% because when I first started, I would paint from whatever just to get practice. But anything I'm selling or anything that I want to paint now, it's all from my photography because, for one, it's more personal to me. Anytime you can take a photograph or paint from life, it's more personal and it means more. So when I first started painting, I would just paint everything, anything off Google or whatever. I wouldn't sell those. But that's a big thing for me is I want to paint my own stuff, my own photography or whatever. So there's a lot of photography.
It's an experience that you have.
Exactly. So there is a lot of pictures that I don't post on, social media just because I want to paint them. And so those are for me or whatnot. So, but yeah, that I do. So that was a time. So, in wildlife, we talk about, especially with artists, we talk about a certain wildlife's gait, their movement, especially with horses, their gait is, I have a good friend, she would always talk about, the horse has a certain movement or wildlife. And so I learned a little bit of things from her. But so the gait of her was just so striking. It was just, the way she looked at me at that moment, it just resonated. So I had to really, it was one of those ones I just had to paint, so yeah.
Yeah, so she's making that eye contact with you, like just paused and noticed. Yeah, that's awesome. So how long, and I know it's hard to say because everything is different, but what's an average amount of time that you might spend on a work?
So it's funny. It's some of your best work, and it goes in with music too. Like, some of my favorite songs of all time, they say they wrote it in like 4 minutes, So it's funny the same way. It's like some of my favorite work or best works have, just taken, it was just so easy and simple. I wouldn't say easy, but it just flowed really well. And the first bear I did painted that I got accepted to the Western OPA, Oil Painters of America, that one would just went super quick. Everything, went good. Blondie, actually, I started that at the museum. So every year the museum, they do a plein air. And so that was my demo piece. I decided to do it as a demo and I didn't sell it. And it's a good thing I didn't sell it because it was way off. The proportions were off. And so I brought it back to the studio and I'm like, oh yeah, this is way off. And so I retouched everything and just kind of polished it up. And now I don't know if I'm going to sell it or not, just because it has a lot of meaning to me. But yeah, that one, so it went quick, but then it was off. And so I had to go back and redo it. So the $3.99 big painting, the life size of $3.99 that I did, that's hanging at Jenny Lake Lodge, that took approximately about a year. Not straight with a year. There would be 2 or 3 months I wouldn't touch it. I would just put it off to the side. And anymore now, especially these bigger ones, if it doesn't flow right, I just set it to the side. The fox painting that I just did recently, again, that was one that I painted quickly and just wasn't feeling it. And so I put it aside for 3, 4, 5 months, and then I brought it back out. sometimes, and with photography or painting, I have to remember why I painted it, why I wanted to paint it in the first place. What was the main idea, and so sometimes you get distracted with so many different things, you forget the main idea. And so I just went back to the main idea and it just clicked. And I'm like, oh, okay, this was the main idea, went and finished it. And I'm pretty happy with the results of that. So, I have to remind myself when I'm painting or when I go out into photography, what is the main idea? What are you trying to convey? Because there's a story. So just like with Blondie, the whole story was that rim light and her looking at me. That was the whole, and that's why the painting's very simple. If you don't get the proportions right, then it's very off. But it's a very simple painting, as long as you get everything, all those elements correct. And so that's why I had to retouch it and redo it, because I had her really skinny and she didn't look right. So, but yeah, and that was the main idea. And so sometimes I don't care, like Gordon Ramsay always talks about, simple and using the best ingredients, right? And so like my photography, I try to keep it clean and simple, clean and clear. That is my goal. Sometimes, of course, it doesn't come out as clean and clear. Either it's at night or very, you got to crank up the ISO and get tons of noise or whatever have you. Yeah, as you know. So, but that's kind of been how I was kind of taught, is keep it simple, what's the story? And so, especially with the mountains around you, when I go out there, I see a bear, and like for instance, Blondie Jr., that one photo I sent you, that one, there was a couple people up there. Everybody, the light was focused on her. And I'm like, wait a minute, the Tetons are behind her. So I was like, so I drove way around, and I'm like, no, even though it caused that rim light, which again, I love rim light, and the Tetons were behind me, and it was just kind of interesting because everybody wanted the closest shot of her. And that's what I've been finding out watching other photographers. They want the closest shot of the animal, which is, there's no problem with that. And sometimes I do that a lot. But when you have a scene like the Tetons in the background, you take advantage of that. And for me anyways, I love rim light because it was like 3:00, the light was harsh anyway. So it's like, I'm going to make it in a rim light. Tetons are in the back, it was just kind of funny. Nobody was, that was, what I saw. And that's what I look at anytime I'm painting or, doing photography. Okay, what do I want? Sometimes you can only get what you can get, but especially with her, since she was just eating the grass and everything. So you had time to play around, and so I'm like looking around and I'm like, okay, this scene, this is the scene I want, so, sometimes there's photographers that I've learned from, like Mangelson, that would set up for days on a scene that he wanted. And so that's one thing I learned a lot from him is, kind of project what you want. If it happens, great. If not, no big deal, find something else or whatnot. But so same thing with painting is, what story, what am I trying to convey? So I try to keep it simple. Sometimes you can get distracted, and so that's what I keep going back to. Okay, keep it simple. What was the main focus that you were, what made you want to paint it in the first place, or that scene? So that's what I go back to.
I really like, kind of mentioned it several times here about, we're trying to tell a story with whether it's a painting or an image. And I think that starting out in photography, and even still, I always wanted what you were talking about, those close-ups. I wanted to see every fine detail in the hair and fur and, all of that stuff. And I still enjoy that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the longer I've been doing this shot of Blondie Jr. is more along the lines of what I'm hoping to do. Now, not every situation allows it. Sometimes you have to say, okay, in this scene, it's going to be much better if I just go with a close-up. But The beautiful thing about the Tetons, my family, we go to the Smokies quite a bit. We live in Pennsylvania, so like you're in the mountains. The Tetons, you're in front of the mountains, and they're there. You're not in them, you're looking at them. And it creates these amazing opportunities for these wildscapes, I'll call them, to tell a story, to show the environment that this animal is living in, surviving in. And that shot there is fantastic. I had no idea that it was taken at 3:00. That's pretty
I want to
cool.
say 3. It was like in the middle of the day. It was like between 1 and 3.
Yeah.
It was a very...
So you just stopped down a little bit?
Yeah. It was actually a very warm November. Very warm here. I mean, it looked like something in the summertime almost. And it was actually November. So I've had a lot of encounters with Blondie Jr. With several friends. And that's the other thing I'm looking for now anymore. And it's hard if you don't live here, but what I really relish and really love is going on these back roads. Like with Blondie Jr., it was me and a friend, and we're just driving on the back roads. And, with her at the very end of this back road, it was just like, so it was even real. It looked so fake. And like we came up and we stopped and we saw this grizzly just staring at us. And we look at each other, we're like, is this real? It almost looks like a cutout. She didn't move at all. And so then she moved, and we were the only ones back there. We got to spend like an hour and a half with her and just watching her do her thing. It was just, I don't know, it was a very cool moment. And those are the moments I really relish, is when you're all alone or you're with a friend, is to see these wildlife, all by yourself, let them do their thing and just kind of stay out of their way, just kind of watching. And yeah, those are the moments I really, really love, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to learn to appreciate, your backyard is the Tetons. I mean, what you get to witness is incredible. And here, I've never even photographed a black bear in Pennsylvania. But I'm trying to learn to appreciate what I do have here.
Exactly.
Whether that's a cardinal
I love
or
cardinals.
An osprey or, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be this big game. And that's what I'm trying to encourage other people to do too. Appreciate what you have, because I think sometimes in your case, that like if I don't get the shot of Blondie Jr. today, there's going to be another opportunity. So you don't have to push and have pressure on yourself. You can just sit back and enjoy. And I think with your local wildlife, you can do the same thing. If the shot happens to come to fruition, awesome. But if it doesn't, you still had a great experience, and then you can go and try it again another time.
Exactly. I mean, for a long time before I moved out here in Nashville, I love cardinals, and that's one thing I'm jealous that we don't get cardinals out here. I really love them, and I wish I got to spend more time when I lived in Nashville. But I got, like I said, I didn't get my camera really until I just left Nashville. And that was my first DSLR. Before that, it was like a little $30 point and shoot, So, but to see, yeah, exactly. I love those little things, and even out here, which we were just talking about that with a couple of buddies, is, I'm getting more, especially where I live, I don't have to go in the park, to see things like pine martens, which around my house, there was, Steve Martin that my neighbor called, and I haven't seen him this year, but he would hang out, in our wood pile to get mice or whatever. To me, that's almost up there with the bears, and, wolves are always my number one. The wolves are just so hard to, find, as everybody knows. But, those little things, we have a great gray that hangs around here, and
that's a dream species for me.
No, it is for me. Every time I see it, I get so giddy, it's just like, it's just so, it's hard to even talk about it because there's no words. So I still get excited when I see a pine marten. I love pine martens. When I see great gray, Even the deer around.
How about your little fox friend?
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about. So that's a female.
That's female. Yep.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see this fox on your story all the time, just hanging out.
Yeah, she's.
I think like a long time ago, I think it was like hanging out on your deck on a chair.
So that was her mom,
like
yeah.
That.
So the story, the story on that one, real quick, is so her mom I called her Vixie. She would just hang out here, and she would jump on the couch. And even if I left, in the summertime, I'd leave the door open, and she'd come on in, jump on my bed, whatever. She just had no fear. Unfortunately, I think that caught up to her. I don't know what happened. We have a lot of cougars around here, and I think a cougar got to her, unfortunately. And it was about that time when she had the kits, and I think she had 3. I still don't know where their den's at. But this one in particular now had a kind of a struggle. It was she's very tiny, kind of like her mom, and her ears, I don't know if it was during birth or whatnot, but I think she would follow her mom to here. And so I seen her once with her mom kind of off the road. So, but I think she realized that this was kind of a safe haven. And so, her mom would just hang out. And so I think she got kicked out a little bit early just because of her. I think something happened to her mom, like a cougar got into it. I don't know. I'll never probably know. So this one, she's more skittish, which I'm thankful for because, I never touched her. She won't allow me to touch her. I've never tried. She gets close, but she will sit here, I'll go outside and, drink coffee or whatever. And, especially in the summer, it's beautiful out. So the evening. So, I'll sit out there for 2 or 3 hours and she'll just sit there and either go to sleep. And then we have a field behind us here and just watching her hunt. That's always very cool to see her hunt. And, her mom used to go hunt and then she would bring the voles or chiselers and drop them right off my feet. And she's like, you watch these, I'm going to go get some more. I'm like, okay. So, either that or their offerings, but, she would go pick them up again and then take them off. So, but it's just so I call her my neighbor. She just loves to, and I think it's like a safe haven. She knows it's safe here. So especially with all the cougars and everything, all the deer that come by, and she still gets a little spooked when the deer come by. She won't get close, and the moose and everything else. So yeah, but yeah, she's my little buddy.
That's really awesome. Yeah. So I know we're covering a lot of different topics here,
all over the place.
No, it's fascinating. You had mentioned previously about wolves. And one of the images that you shared with me was a black wolf.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that image, how it came about, where it was, and all those.
Yeah. Things. So again,
we want the GPS coordinates, right?
Yeah. Which I haven't heard anything. So that wolf is number 1246, and I didn't know it at the time. So that black wolf. So this is hindsight. So I saw him, it was Saturday, it was on a Friday, January 8th of 2021. It was probably one of those moments I'll never forget. It was so cool. I was with a friend, and we heard about this black wolf in the area. And so that Friday, we decided to go up. There was a couple of us at the time, and we went up and where she was spotted. And apparently, my 2 friends saw him, like 300-400 yards out. I didn't see him where I was standing, but I saw the female wolf. It was an 8-year-old female that he was courting, and I saw her, but she was like 300 yards out, and she was very skittish. And I saw her for, 20 seconds, and then she was gone. And so we were waiting all around all day, hoping they would come back and everything. And then one of our friends had to leave, so he left, and it was starting to get dark, especially in January, about 4:00 here. It gets started to get dark. And so we're like, all right, let's call it a day. And so we left, we started leaving, and then oh heck, probably 5 miles down the road, 10 miles down the road, we see him come down the hillside. And so January at 4 o'clock up in the park, there's nobody up there. So I just stopped in the middle of the road and watched him come down the hillside there. And he was coming right for us. And he was just kind of jogging right for us. And we were just so ecstatic. I mean, I didn't even check my camera settings on my camera. And so that photo is not the clearest. I should have cranked up the ISO, cranked up the speed, but it was from earlier that day. Didn't see anything. And, when you're so excited, sometimes you forget to check your settings. So it wasn't the sharpest, but, you're so excited to see a photograph. And then he stopped around my car and he spent 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, just kind of sniffing around my car. This guy was fearless. He knew we were there, but he didn't care. And so we were just like taking it all in. And then he started going up the road. So we turned around and started following him. And funny thing is, there was a car. This is the first car. So it's been like 15 minutes. And this was like the first car that we seen come by. It was going the opposite way. And, this wolf is like kind of jogging, in front of us. And we're giving it space. And this car stopped and she's like, "Did you lose your dog?" And my friend, she's like, "Yeah, we lost our dog. We're good. See ya." And they kept going. And so we just, followed it. And then this is when the Rangers started coming. And this Ranger, she just transferred from Arizona. So she's never seen bears, never seen wolves. And so we're facing the Ranger. The Ranger's coming the opposite way. The wolf is, heading right towards the Ranger. And the Ranger started turning on the lights and started trying to haze it off the road. And the wolf just stood there like, "I'm going that way." It's like, and it was just funny because the wolf is smart. They're not going to go in 4 feet of trudge through 4 feet of snow when it can go on, on the road that's been, the snow has been cleared out, just like the cars has, plowed. There we go. That's the word I'm trying to say. And so, finally she kind of realized what the wolf was going to do. And so she turned around and she rolled down her window and she's like, "This is cool." And I'm like, "Yeah, this is so cool." So we followed him up probably to where we started in the morning. And then that's where he took off and we didn't see him. That's the last time I saw him. Apparently my friend saw him the next year. I guess they had pups and everything. I never did get to see him. But there was tons of wolves. And so I didn't know at the time what number he was until we went to Yellowstone and we met up with, the Wolf Project, one of the main guys at the Wolf Project. And I was telling them about this wolf and cause we could tell he was collared and they're like, "Yeah, that's 1246. And he wasn't even 2 at the time. And he was just so huge. His eyes and their paws are the 2 biggest things that I took away. So yeah. And they're their collars, they're on a different budget. Those collars on those wolves are about 15 grand. He was telling us. So I mean, it's pretty, like I said, their budget's a little different. But they could bring him up on a laptop and he was just saying, "Man, we're afraid he's going to get killed or ran over because he's fearless. He doesn't care." And, so hopefully I haven't heard anything about him in a year or so. I mean, this was in 21. So hopefully he's kind of thriving and, with another pack or kind of thriving with the pack, but I don't know. I don't know anything. I need to try to find that out, but, that was an experience that I'll never forget. It was cool.
Yeah. And to have an image to represent that experience is just fantastic. Yeah. You mentioned the eyes, and that's what, on that dark wolf, those eyes just stand out so well in that photo.
And no picture, honestly, there's no pictures. I don't care how good of a photo it is. To see something in real life, there's just no photos that can kind of take for that. I mean, it's just to see those eyes in real life it was almost eerie to see those piercing yellow eyes. I mean, that close. I mean, we were in our car and to see this wolf, 5 feet away 10 feet away. It was just, it was crazy. It was awesome. It was a pretty cool experience for sure.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you, since you live in the greater Yellowstone area, have you ever pet a fluffy cat?
No, I have my comforter is a big old bison rug, but that's about the closest I've ever touched one, or I have touched one. But a live one, no. It's just, no. I'm actually more afraid of moose and bison than I am a bear or, again, they can hurt you and kill you.
The tourists aren't, though.
I mean,
the tourists, I don't get it. I mean, you can watch videos year after year. It's like, why don't these people start following what I follow?
Well, did you see
so they can see what's going to happen.
I mean, it's just, did you see last year they were counting bison 4, people 0? I mean, it's, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a 2,000 pound animal that it can, it's the size of a car that can just kill you within seconds. So, no, I've seen too many, scary instances from my car, and it's like, no. I've never came close. If I've been close, it's in my car, and then you see people even honking in your car. I'm like, do you want your car damaged? Because I don't get it. But
it's crazy.
Yeah.
But people keep trying.
Right. I'm like, well, I guess we'll let them learn the hard way. So.
Wow.
But yeah.
So your paintings, do you work by commission, or are you, as you said, there's photographs that you come up with. So how do you find a customer? I guess is my main question.
Actually, social media, I've gotten quite a few, but I got my paintings. I got 4 or 5 of them at Jenny Lake Lodge. So I get them from there. I do some commission, but I'm very picky on my commissions, honestly. A lot of commissions I've done in the past were of like people's dogs or whatnot. And so that one I can get around, but the photograph has to be good. I would rather take the photograph if we're in an area that I could go do it. So there is some stipulations that I do. With commissions, and some I've turned down a lot just because it's not for me. And if I'm putting if I'm putting my name on it, I don't want it out there, and go back, years later and call them old dogs that I'm like proud of. And I don't want it out there. So I don't care if it's a commission or something that I've done. If I don't want to put my name on it, I won't do it. So commission or not. So, but that's in general. Just a lot of, that's the thing about art or with anything. It's all who I know someone that paints and stuff like that. So it's hearsay. It's, a little bit of social media. It's a little bit, from, like say Jenny Lake Lodge. So it's a little bit of everything actually. Getting your name out. So that's basically the bread and butter.
Gotcha. Yeah. Awesome. So we can't talk about the Tetons without maybe talking about your favorite experience with 399, the most famous bear in the world. Right. So I know that you shared an image that we'll put on the screen here of 399 that is just amazing. Very high key, the snow was out. Right. So tell me about your favorite experience with her.
That's probably it. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever was alone with her. There's always been people. She has an entourage as being the most famous bear. Anytime she's out, she's going to have an entourage. The bear jams are like someone who got out of a concert. It's crazy. And so I don't think I've ever been alone with her, or even with a couple people. It's typically bear jams. So this one that you're putting up on which one are you putting up? We'll
put them all up. I know you sent a video that's probably, was that from the same
day,
same period of time?
That one was tax day. That was April 15th. of 21. So it's funny there that day. Again, April is typically the park is kind of dead. The inner road's not open, so you don't have a lot of people coming. It's kind of the shoulder season. So 610 had been out with her two cubs or subadults. And so I went up to go and see if I could see her. And and I'm like, where is everybody at? And 610 wasn't at time I got up there. And I couldn't, and it was funny because I was texting people, but my texts weren't going out. And I'm like, that's weird, because that time you could get internet on most places. So it was kind of a strange day because there was no phone service. And I'm like, what is going on? And so it's kind of eerie in kind of a sense. So 610 wasn't, I was like, okay, I'll just drive up. And time I got to Jackson Junction, where Willow Flats is, that's where she was. And that's where there was a little bit of crowd. So it was mostly locals. There was probably, I don't know, between 10 and 20 cars. Wasn't too many compared to other, because nobody thought she would come out that early, because she went to the den prior New Year's Day of 21. So she was only in the den for 4 months. But of course, when you have 4 big bears, I wouldn't want to stay in the den either. So, there was this kind of funny, because from what I gather from a couple friends, that tourists said that they saw, 5 bears, and we're like, 399's out. And so that's where everybody was. So I got there a little late. So I got to see her right at the junction, and then she was just kind of on a mission to basically she kind of zigzagged, and then she was heading towards the Tetons, and then she decided to cut down on Jackson Lake, Jackson Lake there, which was still frozen. And so, yeah, that one image of all 5, I call that ice walkers, just because, they're on there. So it was just so cool, because she would kind of spend a little time and then go. And then there were some areas where, because that overlook, I mean, it was probably about 150 yards. Again, another photo that wasn't my best photo, because, it's 150 yards out. She was pretty far out there. So you had to kind of pull over and then hike down, or not down, but hike to the overlook, and you're trenching through, 3 foot, 4 foot of snow, and you see her down there. That's where I got some of the video and some of the shots where she was walking on that lake. And it was just so cool, because as you can kind of see, the overcast it was, and the blues. I'm a sucker for blues. And then she kind of went in the trees, and we didn't know where she would come out at. And so we just kind of parked alongside the road, and then she came up onto the road, and that's where I got the video at the very end of the video. And she just came right. That's why I was so close. I was in my car, and she would just walk right by, like they were, like I said, they were rock stars just coming on the road and the entourage. And then, she went up and places that we couldn't go. And then, that was a pretty epic day. And so, but it was kind of, if you weren't up there, unfortunately you would have missed it, because it just happened within an hour or two, because she was just constantly, slowly going from Pilgrim Creek all the way to, Signal. So, so I just happened to be up there, got lucky, and just took advantage of it. It was so cool, because it was mostly just locals who we all know each other. And we were just so excited, to see her. And it was kind of nice, because, we try to do, and then of course the next year, she came out in April. So everybody just and their dog was up there in April expecting her to come, and she came out. She probably came out a couple of days, but what we could see was April 16th the following year. So it was just a cool experience, So that was probably right up there, my favorite experience with 399. There's been other times we just sat there and watched her, but when she came out with the 4, that was another cool experience. I mean, when they're all itty bitties, but Yeah, that one, even though that stage of the cubs, I call it the hyena stage because they look like hyenas, because they're not really, they're kind of langy and, they're not filled into their bodies yet. So it's kind of an awkward stage.
And there were four of them. So like they were all competing for food and, so they were a little bit smaller.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, they're still growing and it was just kind of an awkward stage for them, especially that 1-year-old, but yeah, it was just an incredible experience, that I was so fortunate to witness for sure. But yeah.
Well, that's awesome that it was a chance for the locals who are there year round to have that opportunity without the craziness that can happen in a national park these days. We talk about it all the time with social media. It's good and bad, but we're overwhelming our natural places. So being so close to the national park, I wanted to ask you, with the shutdown that we experienced during the COVID period of time, the national parks were shut down. Did you notice a difference whenever things opened back up with the wildlife? Did it seem like they were doing better?
Probably. So we couldn't go into the park. There's certain times where, they had it shut down, right? So we couldn't, and if you lived in the park, right. I had a couple friends that lived in the park. They weren't allowed to stop. So they couldn't stop. And they were telling me on the way that, they were out and about, and so they were kind of I think they were kind of enjoying it without just crowds. And that's the other thing too, though.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. So like, for instance, 399, 610 and Blondie, a lot of people are like, oh, it's kind of a catch-22 where, they want to be by the crowds. That's why they're by the road, is to help protect their young. 399 is so smart that, every time she wants to cross the road, you can kind of get a sense because she'll sit there and watch, and then her cubs will be in the back. And then she, when it's clear or when she wants to cross, she'll turn back and give them a signal, and then they'll cross. But, yeah, we definitely need to give them their space. And, every single one has been probably too close than they should have. So it's like one of those things where it's a balance where you got to give them space, but at the same time too, because they are so close to the road and those crowds, it helps protect, those cubs from those big males that want to, unfortunately, like all males, they want to, mate and, fool around with the women and, but they will kill, unfortunately. So it's one of those things that for them, I think, I don't think it mattered much to them, maybe a little bit, but, for the other wildlife like moose and everything, the other thing, like my brother always jokes around when he comes and visits me is, man, these animals are so habituated. And it's so true. And most of the animals and the wildlife in the park, they are so used to they're so used to humans, but humans kind of push that envelope of getting way too close, and they either bluff charge or or whatnot. I mean, there's an elk that hangs around all the time. I guess his name is Hollywood. That he could care less if you're there. But I've seen him bluff charge. A couple people that got about 5 feet away. I mean, you're talking about an elk, 5 feet away that's pretty close. That's like with bison, and so, I mean, yeah, wildlife, even they're habituated, have their limits as well. So, but again,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us, I don't care if you're on the trail or whatnot. I think we've all been probably too close. I ain't going to lie. It's one of those things that you gotta, you kind of have to read the animal, because sometimes the rule here is 100 yards, but a bear can run faster than a horse in the first 40 yards. And so 100 yards ain't nothing if they really wanted to get to you. So, you have to read
Thankfully,
yeah, right.
These animals are smart.
Right.
And they're smarter than us sometimes. And I'll tell you a quick story here. Like, I was photographing some bears. There was a mom, black bears. There was a mom and a couple cubs. and there was a group of people. They were getting way too close. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm watching this, and something stupid is going to happen. These people are just way too close. And I'm watching this unfold, and we were like on a hill. And so like we're kind of walking down, but then there was this drop off, and I'm thinking, what the heck? They're way too close. All of a sudden I look to my right and I hear this little, the mom was right there beside me. Oh. I had no idea because she was on the other, like the downside of the hill. So here I am watching these other people trying to stay back myself, not realizing the mom had looped around, and there I was. Wow. So, they are habituated. They are thankfully lenient, right, for us. They help us out in our stupidity sometimes, I think.
For sure.
But like you said, they're using these people and the roads to keep their young safe. Now, the great thing is that I think they call it the Bear Brigade there in the Tetons.
I call them something else, but I won't say it.
Yeah. Well, as long as people are not surrounding, and that bear has an outlet. $3.99 Blondie, they can choose to go back away from the people anytime they want.
For sure.
They have that opportunity. So,
excuse me,
like you said, they're using us to their advantage.
Right. And again, it goes back to a balance of, you got to let them do their thing. But yeah, exactly what you said. They're using us, and as long as we're not being stupid about it, so again, it comes down to balance. And so we're very fortunate. And again, I think each year, $3.99, her status just grows every year. This year, she became the oldest mom, on record on the greater Yellowstone area. So their status, I've met people from, that's a good thing too, is I'm not a big crowd person, but I've met some really, it's kind of that one of those hate and love relationships where I've met.
That's why I like the woods.
Right, exactly. And that's why I love living it way out here, is you're by yourself and you can just enjoy it. But I've met some really cool people in those crowds too. So it's like, I can't hate it all. And they're just trying to enjoy, but people are traveling. Man, I've met people from Germany, Switzerland, all over England, just to try to get a glimpse of $3.99. And again, it goes to that balance where people are spending thousands of dollars to come here to watch, to just get, just to see. That's what people are, that's what the parks are for, is to enjoy not just wildlife, but fishing, biking, the trail system, so everything. And so that's why I kind of have a hate and love relationship with the brigade and the park. It's like, they came here, spent thousands of dollars, and wanting to enjoy, if they're doing everything right.
Whenever we were there, we had good experiences.
Oh, good. And there's some awesome ones. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. There's some awesome ones that I know, and they do an incredibly awesome job. And, they're like, yeah, the bear's over here, and kind of tell the history. And that's what, that's what I think they're supposed to do. They're ambassadors of the park, right? And so, and I hear a lot of people have great experiences with them. So I'm very thankful for that, so I really like that.
Well, I want to ask you one final question here. And I don't want to, we've been talking here for a while. I don't want to eat up your entire day.
No, I'm sorry. I ramble on.
No, not at all. This has been fantastic. But as an artist, watching all of this craziness with AI, and now Photoshop has this generative fill, have you experimented with that at all yet?
So my editing's very limited, honestly. Good. Well, it's one of those things where, because I do photography, painting, other things, I have to ask myself, how much time do I want to put into something, right? And so honestly, my editing is Lightroom on my iPad. I don't even have the full version. I have Lightroom Touch. And again, my whole philosophy of photography is clean and clear. That's my objective. Sometimes I can't get that, of course, and so I just do very minimal editing, and And then mainly they're there for, okay, what I want to painting, but it's a love. I love photography. I love painting. So it kind of goes hand in hand. And so when you see people, like I was talking to Isaac, and, somebody put Hoback, one of the famous mooses, moose, however you say it. Meese, right? There's actually an interesting story about why they call moose and not meese, but I won't get into that. But someone photoshopped that into the Green Rivers. I'm like, huh? And it's like, yeah, either he took a 100-mile trek to the Green Rivers, and it's just like, come on, So the whole.
So my question like, as an artist, as an artist, like, you're taking this picture and you're interpreting it then with a different medium. And I'm wondering, like, for you, even though you might not be using it yourself, what is your thoughts and your opinion then of, like, this generative fill where you can click a button and basically this program is going to create something that wasn't even close to what it originally was? I'll stop there. What is your thought on that?
Like back in the film days, right? So the film days, the only thing you could do is dodge and burn. So you couldn't manipulate the photograph that much. And so anybody who did film days, like Tom, you really had to know what you're doing. Your skills and everything else, you really had to know what you're doing. So now with the evolving that, for me, I have no problem with digital art or whatnot. The only problem I have is when they say, "Oh, this is how it was." I'm like, really? So if you don't disclaim, that this wasn't what it was, this is what I did, and this is art, and because everything can be art, which is no problem with that. It's where it gets a little like, "Oh, this is how it was." It's like, really? That's how it was? When you start putting in bears and other places, and that's how it really was. And it's like, it's like, as long as you're upfront about it and you say, yeah, I put in a bear in this, and this is, my digital art. There's nothing wrong with that, or changing the sky purple and really wasn't purple, or whatnot. It's all art, right? So there's no problem with that, but long as, to me, I think you gotta have an obligation to disclaim it, especially as an artist. If you want to be, I don't know, credible or legit, it's unless you're lying to yourself, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's just, that's how I feel about that. There's nothing wrong with it. I just think you should be upfront about it.
I think that's a fair assessment of it then. The technology is incredible. I think that we can use it for a lot of things. My philosophy is pretty much the same as yours. I don't have a problem, like, if there's a branch that I don't really like that's covering something, I don't have a problem taking something like that out. And for me, I'm not very good at Photoshop, and this new technology makes it very easy. And now there's still a lot of experimentation. It's not always like the first thing that you click, it's going to work. But I use it to help maybe create the image that I wanted to see, that was almost there, that you just need to tweak just a tad. But you're absolutely right. If you're totally, I'm putting an owl beside this bear, well, you got to be honest about that. That's not really what you saw.
Yeah, so, it's starting to, again, it comes down to like a balance of, okay, what, if you're trying to manipulate, like I said, a branch that you're trying to weigh, I don't, that doesn't bother me. There's some realists, but it's just like, I've talked to some photographers that, they're like, oh, I don't do any editing at all. Well, unfortunately, if you're doing digital, from transferring it from the camera to the computer, even a small amount, it's going to edit it, because it has to convert to JPEG or whatever. So even if you don't say you edited it, the camera or the software or whatever still edits a little bit, So unless you're film days and you still got to develop, and back in the film. So one way or another, you're editing how much, but there's a lot of great photographers that will kind of explain, this is my raw image and this is what I did, the before and after, which I think is really cool. This is what I look like from the raw image, and here's what I did. I lightened this, darkened this, took this out, cropped this, whatever. I always love to watch that, and there's a lot of photographers that I follow that do that. It's just so cool to watch. It's kind of it's like painting, because that's how you see it. And editing is its own little, it's your personality touch to it. Some people like it darker, some people like it lighter, and whatnot. So it's its own, everybody, and that's how I can kind of distinguish a lot of photographers is by their editing process, which is so cool. Like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so, that's yours. So you kind of have that signature on when you edit, so yeah. But yeah, with the whole AI, I mean, yeah, so.
Well, I love watching your time lapses that you do.
Thanks.
Starting with a blank canvas, then blocking it out. And then, I have zero artistic ability whenever it comes to that kind of thing. So to watch someone that has that talent, it's really neat to watch that process unfold. So your Instagram is a fantastic follow. If you're not following David, you've got to give him a follow. It's David Barry Studio on Instagram. You won't be disappointed if you take a look at his stuff, for sure. So David, I really appreciate our conversation that we had today. I feel like we could keep going here for another hour.
Oh, for sure. And by the way,
I was
going to say, for the record,
go ahead.
I'm no real cowboy. I just horse around a lot. So, I mean, yeah. So I don't want to get that out there. I'm no real, yeah. Yeah, I hang out with a lot of real cowboys and everything, but...
Well, thank you everyone for listening to us today on the Wild Shutter podcast. Be sure to tune into our YouTube so you can see some of these amazing images that we were talking about, and we'll see you next time. Take care.